There are moments in our lives when we arrive at a crossroads.
You did not answer my letter.
Because I do not wish to see you.
What do you need to do?
Being a mistress is the last thing I would ever want.
How else am I to be with a woman society has made it impossible for me to be with?
Let's start from the very beginning of the trailer, because the first few seconds alone already told us so much about where this story is going. And honestly, I had to pause it multiple times just to catch my breath. The trailer opens with Sophie, and the look on her face is not the same Sophie we met at the beginning of the season. This is a Sophie who has been through something. Her eyes carry a weight that we have not seen before, and that alone set the tone for everything that follows. Because right from the first frame, the show is telling us, this is not going to be easy, and we need to prepare ourselves. Now, if you have been following along with everything that has been happening this season, you already know that Sophie's entire world has been built on a foundation of secrets and lies that were never hers to begin with. She did not choose to be hidden. She did not choose to have her identity stripped away from her. Lady Araminta did that. Sophie's stepmother, the woman who was supposed to care for her, has spent years making sure Sophie stays small, stays invisible, stays beneath her. And now, in part 2, we are going to watch that cruelty reach its absolute peak, because Lady Araminta is not done. Not even close. The trailer gives us glimpses of her scheming, and every single second she is on screen radiates a cold, calculated malice that genuinely made my skin crawl. She knows that Benedict is looking for the lady in silver. She knows that Sophie is that woman, and she is going to use every weapon available to her to make sure Benedict never finds out the truth. And the most devastating weapon she chooses? She accuses Sophie of theft. Let that sink in for a moment. This woman, who has benefited from Sophie's presence her entire life, who has watched Sophie work and serve and survive with nothing in return, turns around and uses the law against her. She has Sophie thrown into prison, and the leaked scenes surrounding this moment are absolutely gut-wrenching, because we see Sophie in a situation that no one should ever have to face. Alone, frightened, and completely powerless in a world that was already stacked against her. I genuinely felt my chest tighten watching this, because after everything Sophie has endured, this felt like the cruelest blow of all. She has done nothing wrong. She has survived everything that has been thrown at her with grace and quiet dignity. And yet here she is, locked away, while the people who have wronged her walk free. But here is where the trailer starts to shift. And this is the part that gave me so much hope, because we also catch glimpses of Benedict. And the Benedict we see in part 2 is not the same man who made that devastating offer. There is something different in him. A desperation. A realization. You can see it in the way he moves through the scenes, the urgency in his face, the way he looks like a man who suddenly understands exactly what he is about to lose and cannot bear the thought of it. And honestly, watching him go through this journey, watching him confront his own flaws and the limitations of the world he was raised in, is going to be one of the most compelling parts of the entire season. Because Benedict has always been the charming, artistic, free-spirited Bridgerton. He has never had to truly fight for anything the way the rest of his siblings have. But Sophie is making him fight. And part 2 is going to show us whether he is truly worthy of her. The leaked scenes also give us something that I have been desperately wanting, which is a deeper look at the emotional conversation that happens between Benedict and someone close to him. And from everything I can piece together, it seems like this conversation is the turning point for him, because Benedict starts asking questions, real questions, about Sophie, about her past, about who she truly is beneath everything that has been hidden from him. And this is where Penelope's role becomes incredibly significant, because as Lady Whistledown, Penelope has access to information that no one else has. She moves through society collecting secrets the way others collect jewels. And when Benedict comes to her, desperate and searching, she is going to be the key that unlocks everything. The trailer has a moment, brief, blink and you will miss it, where we see Penelope with a look of absolute focus and determination. And I am almost certain that this is the moment she decides to use her gift, not for gossip, but for something genuinely good. For love. For justice. And that is going to be one of the most beautiful things this season gives us. And then there is the necklace. I have been talking about this necklace since the beginning of the season, and the trailer confirms what I suspected. Sophie's necklace is not just a piece of jewelry. It is a key. It is proof. It is the thread that, when pulled, unravels every single lie that Lady Araminta has built around Sophie's life. Because that necklace belonged to Sophie's mother. And Sophie's mother was a noble woman. Sophie is not who the world has been told she is. She is not a servant girl with no name and no claim. She has a lineage. She has an inheritance that was stolen from her. And the moment Benedict and Penelope piece this together, everything changes. Every wall that was standing between Sophie and the life she deserves begins to crumble, and I cannot wait to watch it fall. Now, let's talk about Benedict, because I think this is the section of Part 2 that is going to divide fans the most. And I want to really dig into it with you. Because on one hand, we have spent years loving Benedict, years watching him be the soft one, the artistic one, the Bridgerton who always seemed to move through life with this effortless charm and warmth that made him impossible not to adore. And then he made that offer to Sophie, and everything shifted. And I think the reason it hurt so much is precisely because we loved him so deeply. It was not a stranger who broke Sophie's heart. It was someone we trusted, someone we believed in. And that betrayal, even if we understood the impossible position he was in, left a mark on all of us that is going to take more than a few sweet scenes to heal. But here is what the trailer and the leaked scenes are showing us. And this is the part where I need you to really pay attention, because Benedict's arc in Part 2 is not just about rescuing Sophie. It is about something much deeper than that. It is about a man who has spent his entire life existing within the rules of his world, without ever truly questioning them. Benedict has always been the free spirit of the family. He paints, he travels, he refuses to conform to the rigid expectations of society in the ways that Anthony does. But here is the thing. Freedom of spirit is not the same as freedom of action. Benedict has always had the luxury of his rebellion because, at the end of the day, he still had his wealth, his name, his position. He could afford to be unconventional because his safety net was always there. And Sophie is the first person who has ever made him look at that safety net and realize that it has a cost, that his comfort has been built on a system that crushes people like her every single day. And the leaked scenes show us that this realization does not come quietly for Benedict. It comes like a collision. There is a moment, and I genuinely got chills watching this, where Benedict is confronted with the reality of what his offer meant to Sophie. Not just the hurt of it, but the depth of what he was asking her to accept. He was asking her to give up any future she might have, any chance of being seen, of being respected, of being loved in the open and in the light. He was asking her to make herself even smaller than the world had already made her. And when that truth lands on him fully, you can see it break something open inside of him. And that is when the real Benedict shows up. Not the charming one, not the effortlessly lovable one, the one who is willing to burn everything down if it means making things right. Because make no mistake, the Benedict we see in the second half of Part 2 is a man on a mission. The trailer shows him moving with a purpose and an urgency that we have genuinely never seen from him before. He is asking questions that society has told him he is not supposed to ask. He is pushing against boundaries that have always just been accepted as fact. And every single person around him can feel the shift. His family notices it. His friends notice it. And Lady Araminta absolutely notices it, which is precisely why she escalates her plans and has Sophie thrown into prison when she does. Because she sees what is coming. She sees a Bridgerton man who is no longer willing to play by the rules she has built her entire scheme around. And that terrifies her, and it should. Now I want to talk about a specific leaked scene that has been circulating, because this one in particular completely destroyed me in the best possible way. It is a scene between Benedict and his mother Violet. And if you know anything about this family, you know that Violet Bridgerton is the emotional heart of everything. She has raised 8 children with love and wisdom and a fierce belief in the importance of following your heart, even when the world tells you it is foolish. And in this scene, Benedict comes to her, not with a polished speech or a plan. He comes to her raw and honest, in a way we have never quite seen from him before. And he tells her about Sophie, not the version of Sophie the world sees, but the real Sophie. The Sophie he fell in love with at that masquerade ball. The Sophie who has been living under his roof. The Sophie whose whole life has been a lie told by someone else. And Violet listens. And then she does what Violet Bridgerton always does. She sees the truth of the situation with a clarity that no one else can match, and she tells Benedict exactly what he needs to hear. Not what is easy, not what is comfortable, what is true. And that conversation becomes the fuel that drives everything Benedict does next. What I find so beautifully constructed about this part of the story is that it mirrors something we have seen across every Bridgerton season, the moment where the male lead stops performing and starts feeling, where he stops calculating what is acceptable and starts fighting for what is real. We saw it with Simon, we saw it with Anthony, and now we are seeing it with Benedict. But what makes Benedict's version of this moment feel different, feel more layered, is that the obstacle is not just internal. It is not just his pride or his fear or his inability to communicate. The obstacle is the entire structure of the society he lives in. He cannot simply decide to love Sophie and have everything fall into place. He has to dismantle a lie. He has to find proof. He has to go up against a woman as calculating and ruthless as Lady Araminta, while the clock is ticking and Sophie is sitting in a prison cell because of something she never did. And that combination of internal reckoning and external battle is what makes his journey in part 2 feel genuinely thrilling in a way that I did not expect. The trailer also gives us a glimpse of something that I think is going to be one of the most talked about scenes of the entire season. And it involves Benedict and Colin. Now these two have always had a wonderful brotherly dynamic, easy and warm, and full of that particular comfort that only comes from growing up beside someone. But in part 2, their conversation goes somewhere much more serious, because Colin has been through his own version of this. He knows what it is like to love someone who exists outside of what society has decided is acceptable. He knows the weight of that choice and everything it costs. And watching him extend that understanding to Benedict, watching him be the brother that Benedict needs in this exact moment, is going to be one of those quiet scenes that hits you completely out of nowhere, the kind that does not announce itself as important, but stays with you long after the episode ends. And then, of course, there is the moment we have all been waiting for, the moment Benedict finds out the truth about Sophie. And the leaked scenes suggest that this moment is not small and quiet. It is enormous. It is a scene full of emotion and relief, and a love that has finally been given permission to exist in the open. Because once Benedict understands who Sophie truly is, once the necklace is examined and the truth of her mother's noble blood is confirmed, and the inheritance that was stolen from her is brought to light, there is nothing left standing between them. Every excuse, every social barrier, every carefully constructed lie that Lady Araminta built to keep them apart collapses in an instant. And Benedict does not hesitate, not for a single second. And after everything we have watched Sophie endure, watching her finally be chosen, fully, openly, without condition, is going to feel like the most satisfying exhale this show has ever given us. Now we need to talk about Lady Araminta, because I have been waiting for this moment since the second she appeared on screen. And I want to be very clear about something before we dive in. Lady Araminta is not just a villain in the traditional sense. She is not cartoonishly evil in a way that makes her easy to dismiss. She is something far more dangerous than that. She is calculating. She is patient. She is the kind of woman who has spent years studying the rules of her world and learning exactly how to weaponize them against people who have no power to fight back. And that is what makes her downfall so incredibly satisfying to anticipate. Because when someone that precise and that deliberate finally loses, they do not just lose quietly, they lose completely. And part 2 is setting up a collapse that is going to be absolutely spectacular to watch. Let me take you back for a moment, because I think it is important to really understand the full scope of what Lady Araminta has done. From the very beginning, she knew exactly who Sophie was. She knew that Sophie's mother was a noble woman. She knew that Sophie's father had left her an inheritance. She knew all of this, and she chose to bury it. She chose to take a young girl who had already lost everything, her mother, her father, her place in the world, and strip away the one thing that could have given Sophie a future: her identity, her truth, her name. And she did not do this out of cruelty alone, although there is certainly cruelty in it. She did it out of pure, cold self-interest. Because a Sophie who knows who she truly is becomes a Sophie who cannot be controlled. And Lady Araminta has built her entire existence around control. And then Benedict came looking for the lady in silver. and everything Lady Araminta had so carefully constructed suddenly became fragile. Because she recognized immediately what Benedict's search meant. If he found Sophie, if he connected the woman he had been desperately looking for to the girl living under her roof, the entire lie would unravel. And not just the lie about Sophie's identity. Every single thing Lady Araminta had done to suppress Sophie's truth would be exposed. Her manipulation, her cruelty, the inheritance she had stolen. All of it. So she made a decision. She moved her family right next to Bridgerton House, not out of social ambition alone, but as a strategic move to keep Sophie close and controlled, while simultaneously dangling her own daughters in front of Benedict as acceptable alternatives. Posey and Rosman as substitutes for the woman Benedict was already completely in love with. And the audacity of that plan, the sheer cold nerve of it, is something that makes me furious and fascinated in equal measure. But the leaked scenes show us that Lady Araminta's plan begins to crack much sooner than she anticipated, because she made one critical mistake. She underestimated Sophie. She has always underestimated Sophie. She looked at this girl who had survived years of mistreatment with quiet grace and decided that quiet grace meant weakness. But Sophie is not weak. Sophie has never been weak. She has simply been surviving in a world that gave her no other option. And the moment circumstances shift even slightly in her favor, we start to see the steel underneath all that softness. There is a scene in the leaked footage where Sophie, even in the middle of her most desperate situation, does something that completely stopped me in my tracks. She does not collapse. She does not beg. She holds herself together with a dignity that is almost painful to watch, because you realize in that moment that Lady Araminta never once truly saw her. She looked at Sophie every day for years, and never once actually saw her. And that blindness is exactly what is going to be her undoing. Now let's talk about Lady Whistledown, because this is the part of part 2 that I am perhaps most excited about. And the trailer gives us just enough to make me absolutely certain that Penelope is going to play a role in the story that goes far beyond anything we expected. Because think about what Penelope has access to. Think about what Lady Whistledown represents in this world. She is the voice that reaches everyone. She is the pen that shapes narratives, that shifts public opinion, that can take a story and reframe it in a way that changes everything. And up until now, Penelope has used that power for entertainment, for gossip, for the particular thrill that comes from knowing things that others do not. But part 2 is going to show us Penelope using that power for something genuinely meaningful. And I think it is going to be one of the most important moments of her entire character arc. Here is what I believe is going to happen, and the leaked scenes support this beautifully. When Benedict comes to Penelope, desperate and searching and not quite sure what he is even looking for, Penelope does not just listen. She starts digging. Because Penelope has a mind that never stops working. And the moment Benedict describes Sophie, the moment he mentions the necklace and the details of who Sophie is and where she came from, something clicks for Penelope. She has heard things. She has collected fragments of information over the years the way she collects everything, quietly, carefully, without anyone noticing. And those fragments suddenly start forming a picture of a noble woman's daughter who was hidden away, a picture of an inheritance that was buried. A picture of a stepmother who has been lying for years about the true status of a girl in her care. And Penelope, whose entire identity is built around uncovering the truth beneath society's carefully maintained surface, recognizes exactly what she is looking at. And then she writes, and what Lady Whistledown writes in part 2 is not gossip, it is not entertainment, it is a revelation. It is the kind of piece that does not just inform society, but fundamentally reshapes the story that has been told about Sophie. Because in this world, public narrative is everything. Lady Araminta's plan has always depended on Sophie being perceived as nothing, as nobody, as a servant girl with no claim to anything. But the moment Lady Whistledown puts the truth into print, the moment the Ton reads what has actually been done to Sophie and who Sophie actually is, that perception shatters. And Lady Araminta, who has spent years expertly navigating social perception to her advantage, suddenly finds herself on the wrong side of it. And there is a particular kind of justice in watching someone who has used society's rules as a weapon have those same rules turned against them. And Penelope is going to be the one who does it. And I am so incredibly here for that. But what makes this even more layered and more emotionally complex is what this moment means for Penelope personally. Because Penelope has spent this entire series carrying the secret of Lady Whistledown like a burden. It has cost her relationships, it has cost her trust, it has put her marriage with Colin under enormous strain. And now, in this moment, she gets to use that secret for something that feels genuinely right and genuinely good. She gets to look at everything she has sacrificed to maintain this identity and find real meaning in it. Not just the thrill of knowing, not just the power of the pen, but actual justice, actual good. And I think that is going to shift something fundamental in how Penelope sees herself and how we see her as well. Because this is the moment Lady Whistledown stops being a guilty pleasure and becomes something closer to a hero. And Lady Araminta's response to all of this is going to be something to behold. Because the trailer gives us a glimpse of her in a moment that we have not seen from her before. A moment where the composure begins to slip. Just slightly, just enough. And that tiny crack in her perfectly maintained surface is somehow more chilling and more satisfying than any dramatic outburst could ever be. Because you realize in that moment that she knows. She knows it is over. She knows that the walls she built so carefully are coming down, and there is nothing she can do to stop it. And watching that realization move across her face while Sophie is finally being seen and finally being